Hi. It is, what y'all don't know is I'm the sub. There was actually Amy Parker, who was my former colleague, was supposed to have done this training. She actually did some work with Charity Rowland on the communication matrix and actually worked with them a little bit. So she moved back to Oregon, and so then she asked if I would tag team and do this. So you're kind of getting a sub, but I think it'll work out. Because, here's the other piece. I used to be a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing in Kentucky about 400 years ago. Well, not quite that long, but it's been a minute. But I was a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing for 17 years in Kentucky. And then from that, I started gravitating towards the more severe, profound, more kids with multiple disabilities, and got into deaf blindness and had a few kids with deaf blindness on my caseload. So I naturally started going into that area and found like my little niche in life. And then for about 15 years, I worked for the National Center on Deaf Blindness. I just recently resigned from there in January and took what I have called a nice long sabbatical, where I just sat and wondered what the poor folks were doing, and then I, kind of woke up from my nap and realized it. And so now I'm kind of doing an educational consultant thing. So with that, when I was teaching my last 3 years of teaching, I taught special ed by day and juveniles by night. So I know a thing or two about behavior from all kinds of different ways, from special ed, from juvies, from kids, my own personal, and now grandkids, my own personal. So, behavior is something that I'm kind of a little bit passionate about. I also am a closet kind of assessor. I love to assess. I love to analyze, and so, those are a few things about me. So, you did get a sub, but here I am. All right. So I'm here to talk about the communication matrix. And when I first talked to Amy and Sherry about doing this and stuff, I really was thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to do the communication matrix, but I need to know about my audience. And then that's when I saw your website and talked the behavior thing, and it was like, oh, okay. I kind of, sort of know the kind of behaviors you all might deal with a little bit, but I don't know that you look at behavior the same way that I've been looking at it for quite a while now. Would that be accurate, maybe? Does anybody want to tell me kind of what a typical behavior thing that you all would be doing? Don't everybody jump up or anything. Okay.
As members of this team, our goal is to be the people in our co-op or our self-contained program who would work on FBAs and BIPs for our children who need it with their teacher and classroom people support.
Okay.
Or we would also meet together.
Just repeat the question.
Okay.
Just repeat the question.
Okay, so tell me about what your duties from these behavior teams would be. And now do I need to, woo.
No, you don't have to do that.
A little Vanna action here.
So the team that comes here after trainings, we go back and we meet together as a team, and we also work on our students within our co-ops, FBAs, BIPs, and any kind of data support teachers might need, or any other kind of classroom supports, whether it be social stories or maybe just some tips or observations, classroom walkthroughs. And we're in 2 different buildings, so we have people in both buildings on this team.
Okay, all right, nice. So when you look at behavior, what are you trying to do with it? Adjust it, okay. Well, in my world, here's what I like about the communication matrix, because I feel like, I had to think about what do I like about it? What is it that appeals to me about the communication matrix? And what I really like about it is it focuses on what kids can do. And in special ed, what do? We always focus on what they can't do, right? So what I really like about this is that it's what kids can do. It actually highlights what they are doing. And especially, and I need to stop and talk about the population we're talking about that uses this instrument would be kids that are pre-linguistic or pre-symbolic. So they, once they have 2 and 3 word sentences that they're putting together, whether it's through sign, whether it's through speech, whether it's through some kind of augmentative device or whatever, then we look at other assessments. This is for those kids that you look at and they have no formal communication or very, very little, and you're going to look at those, look at those and move them forward. So that's what this assessment does. And while you may not have anybody like that on your caseload, does anybody have that? Yes, I'm sure that several of you do. Then this is for those guys. And it really does kind of make you look at it in a whole different way. I think you've probably used the communication matrix. Would you agree? I mean, and I would like for you all to please, yeah, I've done, or share today, because, I'm from the South. We love to share. Okay. So it also, for me, it provides that roadmap for intervention. So it's like, these kids are brought into us, or, sometimes it's a real surprise who walks in your door the next day. Oh, I have this now. Now what do I do? So it provides that roadmap. It helps you to identify where that kid is and then where you can go from there. And it helps to determine what's missing. What are those skills that are missing? And the nice thing about that is these kids come to us so splintered, with splintered skills. I call it splintered. Developmentally, they come in a certain way. Well, some of them have things that you're like, how do they know that, but they don't know this? So it's really a nice tool to help to figure out what's missing and things that I need to maybe plug in and make sure that they have. Then it also gives just a clear, beautiful picture. I think in your packet you have one of these. So there's this little snapshot. And then when you do the assessment and you start putting the pictures in there, Sherry, I thought I saw that y'all had done this. Yeah, okay. So if, when you see this and once you go through the assessment and you fill this out, then you start it, and actually we're going to do it online, so it does it for you. You don't even have to do this part. This is the old school. But I wanted you to have that visual and to be able to look at it. So it shows you exactly where this kid is. And that way, too, you can talk to other members of the team who may not be as versed in dealing with this population, or parents in having those meetings with parents and being able to say, here's where we are. This is the things that we're doing. So I really like that about it. And it should also help with team members, because sometimes teams don't want to work with this population, not because, they're mean people or whatever, but mostly it's because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to work with these kids. And guilty, I was there once. I didn't know what to do. And you struggle with it. And you're supposed to be the professional. And as a professional, you're supposed to know everything, right? Or at least you feel like you're supposed to. So then we come in with our clipboards and we act all official and we're going, oh crap, I don't know what to do here, but I'm going to look like I do. How's that? So this kind of helps with that. It really helps. And then it helps you to look at behavior in a different way. Because, in my world, I've come from the deaf-blind world and even the autism world and deafness with autism and, all those mixes and matches that we get with kids. You know, in my world, we look at typical learning this way. And typical learning, we have incidental learning that happens, right? And incidentally is how we learn probably 90% of all we know. Because, you know, even as you walked in here today, you knew how the room was set up, even if you had never been here before. You've had prior experience like this, so you knew you were going to come in and sit down. You actually knew when you got the invitation, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit and please God, let her have some kind of sense of humor or something. I will make it through because it's only 4.5 hours. I can do this. You know, it'll be all right. But you knew how you were going to perform and what was expected of you today, right? And you learned all of this through your vision and your hearing. You know, we automatically know how to adjust our personalities, our things as we walk in, and we've done that through incidental learning. Then there's the secondary learning, which is what we're doing right now. So I'm talking, you're listening, you're gathering information. And very little do we learn hands-on, just because we don't. Most of it we learn with nobody formally instructing us, right? Because we're learning it through our vision, through our hearing. All of those things are gathering information and we're processing it in our brains. Okay, but when we get these kids that have these multiple disabilities, then their sensory challenges kind of turn everything skewed, right? And what happens is this. See where the incidental is? Because if their vision and their hearing or other sensory systems, so their proprioceptive systems, all of those other systems that we're talking about, if they're damaged or not there or whatever's going on with them, very little, or it's very distorted. Then secondary, it's still there, but it's very difficult to learn. So most of these kids, look what has to happen. Direct. It really has to go into direct. You have to teach them very systematically and look at it in a whole different way and use a lot more direct instruction, which is very hard, it's very time consuming, it's very intense. So that makes it a lot different. So what is communication? See, I can't talk about the communication matrix and communication without talking about what is communication. And it's, you know, I'm talking to a group of professionals who deal with communication on a day-to-day basis. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but I can't come here and not say where I'm coming from with communication and why this instrument to me is a very important instrument to use. So communication is interaction, right? And it's a way of reaching out to others. It can be a social act, you know, we love to get together with our friends and talk and visit and gossip and all of those things, right? It can be an exchange of messages. So I'm delivering messages to you today by communicating. It's the back and forth between two people, you know? So what's that? That's turn taking. Oh my God, did we put that on IEPs? That turn taking thing? Yeah, well that's early communication. That's what communication is. Right now, I'm doing all the communicating, but if we were to be talking like we were this morning, I had several exchanges where it was back and forth with people. I listened while they spoke, back and forth, okay? It's also a connection. It's the way we connect with each other. Whoa, okay. So, ground rules for communication. All people are communicative, all. And in my job at the National Center, I had the privilege of going into lots of states and providing technical assistance and going into lots of classrooms and just being around teachers. I've been around thousands of teachers and thousands of kids and in their classrooms and down in their floors and stuff. So I've heard time and time again, oh, well, he doesn't communicate. There's no communication. There's none. And I have to say that's not true. That's just not true. It's what we have to do to look at it to find that communication. They're doing it. Sometimes it's so very small. Sometimes it's just a change in muscle tone. Sometimes, most of the time, what's happening is I'm sitting there waiting, but you know, I am human and an adult, and I act on people too. So if I'm going to come over here, Miss Tracy, and you're my guinea pig. But I'm in here and I'm doing something really intense, and I'm waiting, and you know, we know to wait for communication and wait for our learners, and especially our more involved ones. But then I turn my head, and that's probably when Miss Tracy does something. And I miss it, you know? And it could be just a change. A lot of times, because we're human and because we've got about 500 things going in our brain at one time, you know, we're thinking, oh gosh, I got to go to the next place, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and oh my, I got to go to the grocery store, oh, I got to take the kids to the soccer field, and that's what my brain is doing while I'm supposed to really be engaged with Tracy. But my brain is going brrr, and then I'm thinking, okay, we got to go because I've got a schedule, and I've got to get you going. Come on, come on, come on. And Tracy is not in my same field. You know, Tracy's going to do it in Tracy's time. And see, that's one of the things I had to learn the most, was to wait. To first of all, shut off this internal brrr that was going on in my mind. And when I'm with Miss Tracy, then it's Miss Tracy. It's all about Miss Tracy. And I had to train myself to do that. It took some practice, you know? But I had to train myself to really, when I was going to engage her, it needed to be very intense, and she needed to know I was a communication partner. Because what happens with kids is what we do a lot, we provide learned helplessness. We sometimes, you know, well, I'll get to that in a second, because I'm going to go with my PowerPoint here. Obviously, I woke up in the preaching mode. And now, you know, I will be passing the plate. Anyway, so communication begins at birth. You know, it really does. Communication begins at birth. It's that first cry the mama holds in the arms, hopefully. You know, unless they're rushed off to the NICU, and that's a whole nother experience. And a lot of these kids that I'm talking about that this instrument is good for have started off in the NICU. And that's a whole nother place and a whole nother way of being brought into this world and having experience. And that experience also helps affect the rest of their life. You know, it has influence on it. Okay? So, we also need to remember that our responses to kids with disabilities can help or hinder communication development. Because what typically happens, because we're lovely, nurturing, wonderful people who love to encourage things and get things going, we just want to do for Miss Tracy, because Miss Tracy's over here typing, but I just, oh, let me help you, honey, because you can't do that. Because if I'm the teacher, I'm supposed to do that. You know, then I won't have anything to do. You know? And so we don't mean to do it. We're really well-intentioned. But what we do is we act on kids and we start teaching them, no, you don't do that, we do it. So then the kid just learns, well, all right, do for me. You know, but then they sometimes, and this is a very sad sad thing, but I've seen kids that become a piece of furniture, that people just move around the room. You know? So, I'm going to get off of that soapbox. We'll move on. In my world, in my life, behavior is communication. And especially with this population, we have to look at that and say, not everything. I mean, sometimes your nose actually does itch. You know? So we're not going to, oh, he scratched his nose. What does that mean? You know? So you have to stop and think about what is the communication. What are they trying to tell us? What I would suggest to you, if you're looking at these kids and really wanting to explore and really get into their little heads and stuff, is you videotape. And you videotape yourself in these things, because I guarantee you, each and every one of you are missing things. You're missing things from these kids. Because like I said, as I'm really into Miss Tracy and another kid comes over or says something and I turn, that's when Miss Tracy says, oh, I think I want to do something, and I miss it. Or maybe I'm doing something that when I catch it on video, and it's hard to look at yourself on video. By the way, I don't want a copy of this. I know. I mean, my mama need never worry about me going to Hollywood, so it's not something that I'm dying to do and saying, oh, please pick me. And it's hard to look at yourself. But you know, you have to get over that. You just have to get over it and watch the interaction, because what you're looking at is the interaction. You want to see what is going on. How is this kid responding? Do I need to slow it down? Do I need to slow myself down? Do I need to get into what I call the rhythm of the child? Because the child may not be in the same atmosphere as I am. You know, I come in and I'm doing this. And especially if I've had 3 other kids before this one, and I've, you know, and have 2 others after it. You know, that's human nature, that I'm always like trying to process what happened and what's going to happen. Well, guess what? These kids are the same way. We just haven't thought about it. We haven't thought about the fact that they might need us to slow it down and be very systematic in how we instruct them, and very purposeful in that, so that they can start learning things and getting it in our mind. You know, I'm going to jump into routines here for like half a second, because that's how I teach kids, is through routines, and teaching them every piece and part of that routine. Because then, much like, do you remember when you were learning how to drive? And you weren't even, the key wasn't even on. Do you remember? Y'all go there in your head, and you put it in reverse, and you're back out, and then you go on the street, and you're driving, and you're like, and you look down, you're doing 20 miles an hour, you know? But now let's fast forward to this morning. Anybody want to talk about how you got here? Anybody want to talk about the makeup you were putting on? Or, you know, it could be that maybe you were beating kids or throwing things to here's your lunchbox, please get out, you know. What, you have show and tell? And this is a true story. My child, first grade, Mom, I have show and tell. I stopped on the side of the road, get a rock, get a rock. Anyway, so, but then you go to school and you're the teacher. You know, well, I taught, you know, I always said I taught special ed, and we didn't necessarily, I wasn't like those second grade teachers, sorry. Anyway, so teaching them through routine so that when they get to that place in their head, that they can start sorting it out and start figuring out that pattern of how you do this, the very, very logistical steps to go from here to here, then they'll be able to do it rotely. and be able to do that instead of putting on the, you know, like we did with our makeup or our, you know, singing to the tunes, maybe even signing a little bit to the tunes, you know, whatever we're doing in the car. Okay. So what is not necessary to communicate? And this is where a lot of folks get caught up and go, oh, no, we can't move forward because they don't have cause and effect. He doesn't have cause and effect, so we're not going to work on communication until he gets this. Until he gets that matching, we can't do it. Until he can imitate or whatever it is, or he has no speech so he can't communicate, or he has no formal signs, you know, all of those things. We have to, with this population, not get obsessed with those things. Okay, so what are the elements of communication? Well, first of all, you have to have a sender, somebody who's sending the message. And then you have to have a receiver, someone who is receiving the message. You have to have a means of expression, be that pointing, be that pictures, be that sign, be that speech, whatever way, you have to have some way for them to communicate. And then you have to have a topic. And here's where I think it really messes up with our kids. If you think about a typical day for some of these guys, the topic is, you know, unfortunately, I'm going to say that I've been in a lot of classrooms where the kid is pulled in. You know, they take everything off of the cubby, and oh gosh, it's time to feed, so here we go, you know. And they're feeding, but they've got 5 others that they're trying to feed. Okay, now let's go and go to the bathroom. Okay, we were changing the diaper, all that other good stuff. We bring them back out, and now there's circle time. Oh, and today is Monday, today is Monday. You know, they do that, and what's the weather, what's the weather? Ah, you know, and then, oh, it's time for snack. So here we go again. And we're given the snack. All right, now maybe there's a little bit of time for us to do some kind of academics or whatever. And then, oh, it's time for lunch. And then let's pick them up and let's put them over here and let's change them again and all that. And then we come back and, oh my gosh, these kids have worked so hard, it's time for them to take a nap. And now, I don't know about you guys, but, you know, all right, let's talk about the mush that they eat, some of them. That's not something I really want to talk about. And the diapering. Nobody wants to talk about their potty habits. And past that, there's a little bit of today is Monday and weather, but there's not a lot of interesting things for these kids to talk about. So maybe there's not that motivation for what they could talk about or something that they would want to talk about. So that's what I've seen in a lot of places, unfortunately. I also can't talk about communication without talking about the forms of communication, form and function. So we're going to talk a little bit, and we have a break at what time? 10:45. Oh, I'm good. Okay, so we talk about the forms of communication. So how kids communicate. So sometimes they use behavior, you know, and sometimes, unfortunately for these kids, they've learned that this can be hello. You know, some kind of hitting or whatever can be hello, I want some milk, I want some juice, you know, how are you? It's a lovely day, because that's how they've learned. You know what? That got them attention, right? And that's what they've learned how to do. Then they also can use body movements as a form of communication, sometimes with our more involved kids. Sometimes it's just even a tightening or a relaxing of muscle tone. But see, that's where you have to really know the learner and really be kind of what I call a detective, because you've really got to figure out these kiddos. Then sometimes it's early sounds. Sometimes it's facial expressions. And you know, sometimes, depending on the kid, depending on the learner, even the grimace that they do, that may not mean I'm uncomfortable or whatever. We just have to know that about the kid. Sometimes it's simple gestures or pointing. Sometimes it's concrete symbols. So that's where you get into object cues or that kind of thing. Then you get into more abstract symbols, or the actual object, I should say, with concrete symbols. So a cup or a spoon representing that you're going to eat. Then the abstract symbols, more like, what is Monday anyway? And how do I display that? How do I even get that across? So those abstract symbols. And then combining abstract symbols. And even with abstract symbols, can also be, you know, for a lot of learners, it's print, braille. Those things are abstract. You know, we all had to learn what they meant. We went to school so that we could learn what those letters meant and what they represented. And then the combining of abstract. So that's the forms, how they communicate. Then here are the reasons why they communicate. Because there's got to be a reason why. And if we think about it, to protest, to refuse, or to reject an object, or stop a dislike, so there's one reason. There's requesting an object, wanting something, or requesting an action, like to bounce or to swing or to eat or whatever. Greetings, so hi, bye, mama, those things. Attention seeking is also a reason for them to communicate. Request for a social routine or something to happen, a familiar game. Sometimes it's requesting comfort, just being held or rocked or whatever. And sometimes they communicate to just to talk about something, to maybe even describe, you know, what is this, what does it do, how does it do, or I don't want this, or maybe they're going to look at something, point at it, say it's pretty. They also will comment on an action like, that's fun, if they're bouncing or they're swinging or they're playing or you're doing things like that, or to request information. So that kind of brings us to what we're doing here today, which is to talk about the communication matrix. And the communication matrix is a way, it's a tool to identify a child's communicative skills, their expressive skills. So we're looking at expressive communication with this instrument. The communication matrix was first published in 1990, and then it was revised again in 96 and 2004. And when it first came out, here it was. It was this. And it was for service providers. It was for speech paths and teachers. And it's I can pass it around. I do want this back. I'm going to need it again tomorrow. So I will hunt you down. Don't steal my communication matrix. But if you'll see, it's kind of dry. It's very measured, and it's a little cumbersome, a little hard to figure out how do you use this anyway? What is this? And then you color-coded your own system. You made your own key. The lovely thing about it is they revised it then because you want to ask parents. You want to ask the people who know this kid the best to do this with you. You know, so who's with the kid more than anybody? The parents. So they developed a parent one. And if you'll see, it's in a booklet form. And it's a lot more user-friendly. It just, even looking at it, makes me want to do it much more than this one. This one was like, whoa. This one is a little more user-friendly. It's got lovely little pictures. And this was designed for parents. And sometimes the SLPs or the schools would have a different take on the communication than the parents. Now, why do you think that is? Well, don't everybody jump up. Why would you think? Sometimes kids act different. Of course they do, don't you? She said because they act different at home. Don't we all? I act differently today. Well, not so much, but I do know how to turn on the little church girl. You know? And if I'm in a courtroom, or if I'm with my friends in a restaurant, or if I'm out on the playground and playing with kids. So we act differently in different places. And you know, if we talk about these learners once again, if we think back about where they get started, where do these kids come from? What's been their prior experience? You know, because a lot of these kids, if they've been in the NICU and they've started out there, how many of you have been in a NICU? It's a different environment, isn't it? You know, I really got to experience it about a year ago. My grandson was born and he had an obstruction in his bowel. And so he, pretty much within 24 hours of being born, he was whisked off to the NICU. And man, there's a place. You know, there were 5 other babies in there with him, and he looked like a giant. He was, 8 pounds. So he looked like this big hulking kid, and really they had already fixed the obstruction. He was just kind of in there for, to just check him out all over. So his experience was very limited and very brief and not nearly, even then it was traumatic for his mama, for me as his grandmother. As much experience as I've had, it was traumatic. And then when you look at the 5 others, there were a couple of times that we were whisked out of there because a kid was coding. And all of those bells and whistles and all of those things that are going off, and it's loud, and all these wires that are connected. And even my daughter-in-law was having a hard time, like, even how do I hold him? And she was able to hold him. So a lot of these kids start out and they don't have that bonding experience. They don't have how we typically think about child development, right? The other sad part of it is we don't think about that as teachers. Because we think, oh, we're in school. School's a safe place. It's a wonderful place. Kids should automatically trust us, right? Why? You know? Sometimes we have to earn that trust, but we don't think about that. We don't think about the part that we need to earn their trust. We need to earn them being able, they need to figure it out. Much like if I were to walk in here today, you guys knew what you were coming in for the most part. But if I had come in and had a big old box of syringes here and said, oh, did y'all know that I was going to bring out, you're all going to get your shots for the year. You know, that flu shot season, it's here. And, and I just left it here. And I continued to talk. Would you hear a thing I said? No. No. And then I'm going to go back even further to what I said when we first opened up about even their, and I lost it. I just lost that whole train of whatever I was going to, that just went straight down that track. Woo! That's what happens when you get older. What did I first say? Anyway, please edit that out. You're my new best friend. if we think about, where was I? Okay, if we think about our guys and looking at these syringes, your mind is not going to be on them, right? You're going to be going, okay, when are they going to do it? Is it going to be before lunch? Is it going to be after lunch? Is it going to be during lunch? What if I leave? How can I get out of here? Because I really don't like syringes. And you're not going to hear one word I say the rest of the day until that shot is taken. But see, our kids, if they've been in that NICU situation, if they've been in those kind of environments for a while, you know, and they don't know how to trust. They don't know what that feels like. And we have to teach it. We have to earn that respect and that trust before they do start communicating. You know, if I had that syringes here, I bet y'all would be sitting back there just like this and not, you know, you start closing up everything else. Well, these kids don't know what, especially, oh, I know what it was. The incidental learning, where we're talking about that direct instruction. If they've had no prior experience there, then how are they supposed to know what is going to be happening, how to expect? Am I making sense? Okay, whew, got that back. Okay, so getting back to the communication matrix, it accommodates to any type of communicative behavior. So it's looking at behavior as communication. So that's a little different spin than what you typically do in your day-to-day with behavior. So now we're going to look at behavior, and we're going to celebrate that there is behavior, and we're going to look at it as communication. But we're going to then try to figure out what that communication means. And this is the tool that helps you with that, okay? It involves two major aspects of communication, and that's the reason that people communicate and the behaviors they use to communicate. And you know, if you think about it, we're all using behavior as communication, right? I mean, I can tell by looking in the room and watching you all when it's time for us to have a break, because you start like wiggling in your seat, and you start moving around, you start, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, so I'm reading your behavior. I'm watching it. You can tell when somebody's mad. You can tell when somebody's depressed. You can tell when somebody's, you know, all different things by watching their body language. You know, I'm speaking to the choir here, because you guys always are looking at body language, right? Facial expression. So you're reading behaviors all the time. It's just a matter of now it's in a more formalized way with this instrument. Okay, it's organized into 4 reasons to communicate. And that is to refuse something, to obtain something, for social interactions, and for information. So those are the 4, and if you think about it, it also covers the 7 levels of development that occurs with kids before they reach the age of 2. So typically developing kids and what they do, what are the different developmental levels that they go through. So that's how it's organized, is the reasons, 4 reasons, and those are pretty much 4 of the early reasons that kids would communicate, and then the developmental, all right? So it starts with pre-symbolic levels. So that's before, and what do we do as teachers? We start in at the top. We start with, you know, symbolic, because it's our job. We're teachers. We're supposed to teach them to read. We're supposed to teach them all those things. So what do? We go straight to symbolic. But some of these kiddos don't have all the pre-symbolic levels. And that's where it's a big aha. Oh, perhaps I went too far too fast. Not that I don't, and I'm not a big one for, oh, don't you use any symbols with this kid that doesn't have yet. Because I also feel like there's an exposure piece to this, that they have to be exposed to those things. But it's where I'm going to have expectations. See, I'm going to expose it, but I may not, if they're at a pre-symbolic level, I may not have the expectation until they have these other pieces in place. Does that make sense? Okay, so the pre-symbolic levels, it starts with level 1, which is pre-intentional behaviors. And we'll get into what that looks like, what that means. Then there's intentional, but not purposeful communication. So they're starting to get there. And then pre-symbolic, non-conventional, those are we'll talk about those. And then conventional, pre-symbolic behaviors. Then it goes into 3 levels of symbolic, which are concrete, then abstract, and then they're starting to get to language. And that's where they're getting those 2 and 3 words and starting to put them together, starting to put together simple sentences, phrases, and that's when you no longer need to be on this tool. You could go to another one. The beautiful part about this also is that where's my little thing? You can use this over and over. So I'm going to assess this kid, what is this, September? Then I might choose the skills, the things that I want to, that we're going to work on. Then I could go back and check for progress. So it could be a progress monitoring tool too, in some ways, because you can check to see what have they done. Have they mastered it? Is it emerging? Those kind of things. So it's really a pretty instrument in that respect too. Do I act like I work for them? I really don't, I promise. Okay, so now we're going to go into, and somebody's going to signal me when we've got about 5 more minutes before our break, because I do get on tangents, in case y'all hadn't noticed. All right, so the first level is pre-intentional behavior. And that's the behavior that's not under the individual's control. You think about an infant. It's reflective. Reflexive. It reflects what's going on with their little bodies. I'm hungry. I'm dirty. I'm sleepy. I'm awake. And, if you think about infants, that's pretty much what they do. And what do we do as adults? We read that behavior. They cry and we start, oh, you must be hungry. Oh, you must be this, that, or the other. So that we interpret their behavior and that we interpret their state of being. So if they're sleepy, then we're going to make sure that they're ready to take a nap. We're going to watch their behaviors, their body movements, their facial expressions. And that's usually like from 0 to 3 months that we're doing that. And how many of you are parents and remember that very much? That's that time frame in there that typically we're doing that, but we really don't know. Excuse me, Michelle?
Go back to level 1.
Yes.
So kids at this stage who are having a quote-unquote behavior really aren't having a behavior.
No.
Because it's not under their volitional control. And
Right.
so kids at this, you're not having behavior plans or anything like that. You're just responding to it's really a need. It's not a behavior. Would
Right.
you say that would be your assessment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for, and please, anybody jump in. Okay. So then it starts into intentional behavior. The behavior is under the individual's control, but it's not used. They're not seeing it as, they don't recognize yet that their behavior has an effect on anybody else. So they're crying or they're doing whatever. They just don't realize they're doing the behavior, and we're still interpreting those. And this is that 3 to 8 months, 9 months age frame where we're starting to that cry. Oh, that cry means they're hungry. That cry means they're bored. That cry means this, that, or the other. So we're really, but they haven't realized yet that if I cry, then somebody's going to come and do something about it. Does that make sense? So you see the difference. Okay.
They don't yet have cause and effect.
Right. They do not have cause and effect. And they just don't realize that their behavior affects other people at all. Okay. So level 3 is when we're starting to get into unconventional. This is where like intentional behavior begins. This is when they start realizing if somebody's going to come running. And that takes a while for kids to get there. And some of these kids, and when I say kids, this tool, this instrument, and what I really like about it too, is you can use this with any age group because it's looking at developmentally instead of, okay. So unconventional pre-symbolic behaviors are used intentionally to communicate. But that's where these kids that they've learned this gets attention or this gets them attention. So they use that, but that could be a greeting. They don't know how to shape it. They've learned that this gets people running, but they use it one size fits all sometimes. And you think about some of these learners that you know, and some of them will use biting or scratching or whatever, and that for them could mean, hi, I love ya, or what's for lunch, or I'm hungry, or I'm really mad at you. It can use everything, but they've figured out that can get somebody, that gets action, that cause and effect. And the unconventional pre-symbolic are used intentionally to communicate. They are pre-symbolic because they don't involve any kind of symbol. It's just action still at this point. And they are not socially acceptable for the most part. And these are probably kids that you all have been called in for. Right? Yeah, I see all of you going, oh yeah, we got those. We know those kids. All right. And then the communication behaviors can include body movements or vocalizations. They can include all the variety of any kind of way, simple gestures. They may come over and pull you and take you over to the refrigerator to show you that they want a drink. Or they may pull you to go and get something out of the cupboard. Typically, this is like from 6 months to about a year. This developmental stage is then, if you think about babies learning that. Okay, so now we're starting to get into conventional communication. And these are used intentionally to communicate. The behaviors are pre-symbolic, again, because they're not using any kind of symbol system, pictures, even signs, anything like that. They are conventional because they're socially acceptable now. It's more, it's a better form. They've learned that this didn't cut it for most people, so they're starting to learn. Maybe somebody's worked with them, if you want to say hi to me or if you want juice, hitting me is not the way you get it. Then you need to help me by doing something, okay? And those can include pointing, nodding, shaking the head, waving, hugging, all of those kind of behaviors. Many of those gestures require good visual skills, everything that I just talked about. So some of these kids with visual impairments may not have these because they haven't seen them. They don't, Here again, that goes back to that incidental learning I talked about at the beginning. And if they don't have the vision, then they've lost one of those channels to be able to see it and recognize it and stuff. Okay, and this usually happens between 12 and 18 months. When babies are still, or toddlers are still developing. Okay, so then level 6 is the abstract symbols. That's where we're starting to get into. Yes? I'm sorry? Oh, did I skip it? Sorry. I hit it. I got a little, I think I got a little trigger happy or something. Okay, so level 5 is the concrete. This is where symbolic communication starts. All right, and remember what I said, what do teachers typically do? We go straight for that concrete, right? And we don't think about the other piece. Okay, so those concrete symbols, they physically resemble what they represent and are used to communicate. So I might use this to communicate that, or have the child show me a cup or give me a cup, an actual object, a spoon for eating, those kind of things. A shoelace can represent shoe. Patting a chair means sit down. Those kind where you're really starting to get into those concrete kind of symbol systems where it's there and they can see it. Sounds, a kid may make sounds that represent things. Means I want something up in the cabinet, whatever. Most kids skip this stage and go directly to level 6, which is what I was trying to do. For some individuals, concrete symbols may be the only type of symbol they'll ever get, they may have to have. And what we do in the deaf-blind world is use calendar systems and object cues that represent things. And how many of you are familiar with that at all? I know a couple of you are, but some of you have no clue what I'm just talking about. Where because of the vision and hearing loss, they might use some kind of physical, concrete item that represents an activity or something that you're going to do, so that the kid will have something to build in concept development, which is also a biggie for this population, and really thinking through concept development. But we'll get into that later, okay? All right, so some kids will be staying right here. Some of our deaf-blind kids will be staying here and they won't be going ahead. But that's okay if we can get them to some place where they can give you those symbols and start being able to communicate, not only receptively but expressively. Okay, typically developing kids would be doing this between 1 and 2. That's where they would start doing this. Then going to abstract symbols, such as speech. Speech is abstract. Manual signs are abstract. They come, then they disappear, right? She's signing and you're seeing it, but then it doesn't stay there. It leaves. So they've got to interpret it, they've got to receive it and figure out what that means. Braille, printed words, all of those that are used to communicate are at level 6. And those are the symbols that not necessarily physically similar to what is going on. When I'm using a calendar system and using those symbol systems, I'm not going to use miniatures because a lot of kids, if they don't have the vision, can't represent a car with my automobile that's out there. It's very abstract. It doesn't mean, they can't relate. What I would do is really think about tactually, how would they feel it? How would they represent it? So what do they feel when they get on the bus? They don't know that this little Matchbox bus represents that big yellow thing that they get in. So what I do is have to think about, okay, what is it that they feel? Do they feel a seat belt? Do they feel the leather on the seat or whatever that stuff is? Yes. You know, what is it? Do they feel the cold metal? You know, and that's where you look at the child themselves and think about what it is they're getting out of it, not necessarily what I am. And that's where I will blindfold myself, or I will put myself in their body, if you will, and just kind of, all right, what is it they're feeling in it? When I was teaching, I had a deaf-blind child that would go, she was medically fragile and started her instruction first thing in the morning at her house with an intervener going in and helping her get dressed and bathed and all that stuff, and then they'd come to school. They'd ride in Becca's car. But then on Fridays, we go in my car out in the community on community-based instruction. And we wanted some way to represent the difference between her car, which was used in one way, and my car, which was used in another. And I had to stop and think about what is it that she likes in my car that's different than what's in Becca's. And it was she liked the window, the little tab to roll the window up and down. So I tore apart a toy to go out and find something that felt like that, so that we could make that discrimination, you know, change that. Okay, so getting back, this abstract symbols, that's where kids start doing it between 12 months and 24 months. And that's where kids will start seeing the McDonald's logo and recognizing it, you know, and they do that pretty quickly, don't they? Oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, and then we get to the last level, which is then language. So, and that's not necessarily language like what I'm doing today. That can be sign, that can be where they're combining 2 and 3 symbols, be it speech, be it sign, be it braille, be it concrete symbols, be it whatever system, so that they're starting to put it together. Want juice, you know, me go out, me go potty, whatever those things are. And then that usually starts happening right around 2. Okay? So what we're going to do now is stop and take a break. How's that? 15? So we've gone through the levels. I had a question or a comment in the break, and somebody asked about deaf kids who come. Yes, they come at 3.
With little or no language, I'm sure every year that works with the little kids, so they can't imagine anything. So I was wondering where that fits in, and I was here more towards.
Not necessarily. It is not. She said it's geared towards more severe, profound. Not necessarily. It's about language development. So your pre-K kids that have not had those signs, that are the pre-K deaf kids that come in and they have very little communication or formal communication or any kind of signs, this would be a great place to start with those kids, because then you're really seeing what it is they're doing. Okay, and we're going to get into a little bit more of what that looks like. Yes, Michelle?
It might be good for kids who come from other countries who don't have a solid sign system or
Right. English as a second language kids.
Or the kids who go, or deaf kids from other countries
Right.
who don't come in with a solid sign system. And so that's another group that I think that it would have the potential with.
Right.
Unless they're past that preschool age.
Right. And once again, I'm going to say age is not a factor here. It's more about their ability with language, okay? So that's what you're looking at. And so then that kind of gets you to go, oh, well, wait a minute, what about these kids? And all I can say is, you know, it's geared, there's some, and when we get into more this afternoon about what's on their website, what all they have, then I think you're going to see that there's a wide array of folks and resources on their website too. Okay, so getting back, we've gone through the 7 levels. Now, this instrument looks at 4 reasons to communicate, okay? And those they're at the bottom of the profile. So if you're looking at the profile, it's down here at the bottom. You all have a copy? So the levels are over here on the side. And then down here at the bottom are the 4 reasons to communicate. And they are to refuse things they don't want, to obtain things that they do want, to engage in some kind of social interaction, or to provide or seek information. So under each of those 4 major reasons are 24 more specific messages that people express. And those are in these boxes. Each of these messages correspond with the 24 questions that you answer as you complete the matrix. So you're going to be completing the matrix, and it's going to ask you this series of questions. And the specific messages are arranged by level and by reason, okay? So they're arranged that way. Okay. All right, come on. There. All right, so the reasons to communicate. When the 4 probes or the communication intents are refusing or rejecting. So that might be that they're expressing discomfort, they may be protesting something, or they don't want any more juice, they'll knock it off, those kind of things. That's where they're refusing.
And that's also, I think, where a lot of behavior teams see referrals, because they refuse to work,
And
refuse
Michelle's
to complete a task. I think that may be
right. You may be seeing that because of, and I'm repeating for the camera, because yes, my guy in the back is smiling. He's happy with me. Because Michelle said that's where you might get some of those referrals. Because you'll see kids that are refusing, rejecting, that kind of thing. So that's where you may see these. Okay. Then getting what they want or obtaining things. So they may be expressing comfort. They may want you to continue an activity. You know, like if you're bouncing on a ball or something and they want more, they may, give you that. Gets more of a thing, so they might want more juice or more cookie or more whatever. Request a new action, something that's new or different. Request more of a thing. Make a choice, or request something that's not present, not that they can't see it, but they want it. They know where it is. Okay, so, or maybe they don't know where it is, but that's what they want. They would like a cookie. They don't know how to get it. They don't know where it came from. So, but that's on their mind and their heart, but they have no way of letting you know that. So that's where you might be getting some of those. And Michelle's going to, why don't you come up here so I can just do this. I would love for you to co-present here with me.
Well, I'm just thinking that, again, from the behavior team perspective, people who don't understand think of it in the negative way. This kid's tantruming because he wants a cookie.
Right.
And so again, it's the whole getting what you want, but thinking of it in that negative way instead of the positive way. Wow, this kid's telling us what he wants. But again, it's just not at the higher level that we want.
Exactly. So there's that piece where a kid wants it, but the team is looking at it in a negative way. And so therefore, you're getting the referrals for behavior. But the kid, instead of, it's kind of a reprocessing your brain a little bit to think about it in another way. That's what I really like about that. This is one of the things that really appealed to me about this, because then it's looking at it instead of behaviors and we need to extinguish, we need to make it sure it's something else. Then this is looking at it and celebrating, oh, we have behavior, and this is a good thing, all right? Okay, then to socialize is another reason, and that's to attract attention. Sometimes it's an interest in other people, and that's where you might get to, where the kid is up and they're all up in the, and I'll stay off of you, Miss Tracy, and they're all up in their personal business. And it's not necessarily because, people are automatically get on the defense, but these kids are coming up and they're wanting to socialize and they don't know how. But then the person that they're acting on, much like I've been acting on these two ladies, they deserve a prize, by the way. But then you start getting those referrals because of that. Oh, well, this kid is he doesn't know boundaries. And it may be that it's a vision problem or whatever. They don't know about that communication bubble, and people have their own little private spaces and stuff. But you're getting those referrals for that behavior. And it's nothing other than they're trying to socialize, but they're getting in trouble for it. Does that make sense? I'm sure it does. I'm talking to the behavior people. Then requesting attention. Sometimes it's a matter of they're requesting that attention, which I think that one's a pretty no-brainer for all of us. Then greeting people, and once again, I'll go back to sometimes this is how they know to do stuff. So this can mean, hi, how are you? Having a good day? You were saying something to me at the break about someone. Do you want to repeat that? I'll come back.
There was a man in an adult workshop in our building who would always sign to me, Mom, come when? Name Mary. And years he would do that, and I would respond and say, I'm sorry, I don't know when she's coming, and then one day I kind of realized, oh, he's just saying, hi, how are you? And how was your weekend? But those were the signs he knew to use.
So he used hi, or mom, come when, and then Mary, name Mary. Okay, so he was using that with her day in and day out. And she thought he was talking about mom and when she's coming, until she realized that was his way of socially, how are you, and that's what happens. They learn these behaviors. Okay, then there's the showing of affection, offering things. They come up and give you their lovely, whatever they've drooled and whatever, because they find it just lovely and appealing and wonderful. It's the best soggy whatever you've ever known in your life, and it's a true affection of my love that I'm going to give it to you. And not everybody values those things. So therefore you get the behavior calls too. And then there's directing someone's attention to something, or uses polite social forms. So there's the reasons for socializing. Those are different ways that people might socialize. The other then, and this is kind of the last of this cycle of things, and this is, I think, the harder piece is for information. So answering yes and no questions, ask questions, naming things and people. And you know, that's where we as adults don't necessarily, we take for granted. There's so many things we take for granted. I'll go back to that incidental learning, folks. And we automatically think that they know that this is a cup or a glass or whatever you want to call it. Or that it does have several different words that are associated with it. And so there's where the concept development comes in and the language, and we take for granted that these kids know those things. Most teachers do. And then when you start looking at it and going, wait a minute, we haven't given them. One of my pet peeves is more. And a lot of people start with more, right? And they think that it's really wonderful because we've gotten to more. Oh, we got him to do more. Well, unfortunately, that's what the kid learns, and more can mean everything. And for them, sometimes this more is this, it's this, it's this. And it just becomes this catch-all. And then that becomes the label for everything instead of saying, so please, 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 more drink. More jump, more whatever. Yes, ma'am?
Same thing with help.
Yes. Same thing with help.
Help what?
Yes. So, go on and take it home, people. Take it home. Because otherwise, then this kid is just doing more. And that, we don't know what more. Because they could be doing that, we're thinking they want a drink of water when actually they want more cookie or more bathroom or whatever it is. So those are the things that we have to think about. I'm kind of bleeding into this afternoon where we start talking about what do you do with this now that when you have it. But those are some things. All right. Then making comments, just being able to make comments. And how many times do we purposefully teach kids to do that? We don't. Typically as teachers, we're drilling it into them, and then on command we want you to answer us. But not really like just making comments about, oh my, how pretty, or those things. And teaching them, there's a whole art to doing that. We've learned it incidentally. But a lot of our kids, a lot of our students have not. So we have to sometimes purposefully teach them those things. Okay. Okay, so 9 categories of behavior. And this is hard for you guys to see. It's hard for you to see on your thing. But there are 9 categories of behavior. And that can be, and I've got to get even close to see it myself. Sorry about that. Simple gestures. So, and they have on the website, oh, I failed to tell you this morning, they do have these 2. The third one is an online assessment. It's the same thing. It's online, and the pretty part about the online piece of this is that once you've answered all the questions, then it prints out a really pretty thing that's color-coded that shows you. Yes, ma'am? No. 0 cost. It is communicationmatrix.org. And we're going to go on there and play in a minute. But it is absolutely free. They're going to ask you to sign up. Yes?
The second version was for the parents, is this online
This online is for parents, for teachers, for anybody who wants to do it. And it's free. You sign up and you create a profile for yourself. And when you're doing children, students, whatever, they're not asking, they do not want the kids' names on there. But what you do is develop a coding system. So you might, and it's collected in your profile. So if I go on and my name is on there, I've signed in with my password, and then I have, let's say, 10 kids on my caseload, I can do a coding system, and then it will show up here. Like I might use the first 2 letters of their name and the first name and last name. So for my own, it would be N-A and then S-T. And then I would know what that is. They collect data from this because it also asks you questions about their, the learner's disability or whatever. And then they're collecting data, but they don't have any names associated with it.
How do you then transfer if you have a student who moves to a different teacher? Because if it's a coding system, they could have already a kid with the same code.
That I don't.
Repeat the question.
She said, how do you transfer that? And to be honest with you, I don't know, but I'm sure that there is a way. Because as you have the child and then he goes to someplace else, I don't know. I'm a sub. She says, do you need parent permission? You're doing this with the parent. And as far as them collecting data from this, there's no way that they're identifying any of who it is, what they're doing it is for research purposes and for being able to say, oh, this particular population, we found this particular, and you'll see when we go on the website that, it really does. It's very helpful if you were to have a child with Charge syndrome. Are you familiar with Charge? Yeah. Okay, so if you have a child with Charge, there's a collection of stuff that they've come up with for Charge. So it would be beneficial as a parent, as a professional that's working with these kids, to be able to go on and see what they're saying about these kids. So it's not, I don't know that you would necessarily, I don't know. Michelle, do you have an answer for that?
I don't have a full answer. I think that since there's no identifiable information, you don't have to use child initials.
Right.
I don't believe there's any demographic information that you
No.
transfer, not even a birth date, not even
No.
an age.
No. No.
Nothing.
No, there's no identifiable. And they, of course with HIPAA laws and all that stuff, they definitely. But then you have it in your profile. It's locked down, password protected in yours. You have access to it. You know your coding system because like Michelle said, you don't have to use the first and last initials or whatever. You can use 1, 2, 3, 4. You can use whatever coding system you develop because it's your little inner space.
And I would suggest you just talk to your lawyers. I think every
Yes.
district has their own policy as to which systems they feel are compliant or.
Right. If you do have questions about that, if you are concerned, then yes, check with your district to see what their policies.
Or like Nancy said, do it with the parents.
Yes.
And then you'll get an even
Well,
more expansive and complete assessment.
I would encourage you to do this assessment with not only the parents, you can do a group of you. It does not take long. It's, depending on how much communication and stuff, 20 minutes, 30. If you get into discussions, it could take an hour, but it's not a hard thing to do. Yes, ma'am?
Is the parent version in Spanish?
They do have not only Spanish, but there are several different languages on the website. But they definitely have Spanish version of the parent version. So that if you're not using it, if you're using pencil paper with the parent and decide that they need to do it this way for whatever reason, then they do have this in Spanish. I don't know that they have a whole lot of other languages in print, but I do know on the website you can go in and you can change the language settings. So they have several. So it's been around a while, and so they've been able to expand it and do those kind of things with it. And they're still growing. They're still figuring things out and still doing things. Okay, so anything else? All right, so now I'm going to get back to the categories, the 9 categories. And they are, wow, that's hard to read. They are simple gestures. And that's, and then language, conventional gestures and vocals, abstract symbols, concrete symbols, visual, early sounds like cooing, crying, those kind of sounds, facial expressions, and then body movements. And that can be whole body, that can be just the arm, the leg, eye movement, so those are the communicative behaviors that they're looking at.
Can you list the 9th one again?
Yes, ma'am. I will go back. She wanted me to repeat and tell you the last. We have simple gestures, language, conventional gestures and vocals, visual, concrete symbols, abstract symbols, body movements. Was that the one you're missing?
I just missed the last one.
Oh, this one, early sounds, and then facial expressions. Okay. And whoops, I went the wrong way. Okay. And as they're progressing down on the levels, you're going to see more of them, I think, on the other end, when you're getting into those others. Or bigger levels, like 5, 6, or 6, 7, 8. Okay. So under each of the 4 reasons are 24 specific messages that people express. Each of these messages correspond to the 24 questions you answer. And when you get into it, when I first did it, I was like, this is so redundant. They're asking me the same thing over and over and over. Am I ever going to get through this? So it feels like it's redundant, but it's not. It really kind of moves you through those different levels. You just don't realize at the time when you're first doing it. The specific messages are arranged by level and reason, as seen below. So expressing discomfort would be at level 1. To obtain comfort, or expresses comfort, would be like that's obtaining. So they would, in order to get that comfort. Expresses interest in other people, so there's your social. Then when you get down to level 2, when they protest, or to obtain would mean being able to continue an action or obtain more of something. And then for social would mean attract attention. If you'll notice the first 3, there's nothing in the information section at all. So these are the reasons at those early levels. Then as you're getting down into level 4 or 3, that all of these from 3 on down is refusal or reject something. So that's those kids that will, just throw it or pitch it behind them or different things like that. Obtaining, they might request more. That's where more comes in. Requesting the new action, requesting more of an object, making choices, requesting a new object. For social, they're requesting attention or showing affection. So see how it's all starting to come in. And if you look at this, then you'll see those little things are across here. Okay? All right. Okay, so when you're completing the profile covers the first 2 years of communication development, as I've said before, on typical kids without disabilities. We all went through those stages. Most kids do. All right, so there are the 3 versions and the profile chart, and it determines what level of competence the kids have, even things that they've mastered, things that are emerging or they're starting to do but they haven't mastered it fully, and then things that they possibly could work on. Okay? All right, so when you're getting started, it starts with these 3 statements. And usually, you're doing it with a parent because they know their child the best. You can also do it as a teacher, but it really is best if you have a team around, people that know this kid, to be able to complete this. So you want a parent there with you as you're doing it, and that way you can discuss. Because he may be doing, and I've had students before that the parent says, oh, well at home he does this, this, and this, and I'm thinking, that kid, he never does any of that at school. This parent, sure he does. But, they really do. And we have to validate that parents, kids will act differently at home than they do at school. All right, so when you start, it says, please indicate the statement below that best describes the communication skills of your child. Yes?
I was just going to comment. I also don't think it matters whether or not the parent is accurately reporting their child's skills at home. If we just accept what they say and accept those behaviors, and then if we're not seeing it, then we can always go with, it's not generalized, we'll still work on it here in school, but...
Excellent, excellent. What she said was she thinks it's important even if to validate that parent. And I'm going to let you.
I was just saying, if we don't, even if we don't really believe or don't think that child has those skills even at home, that it doesn't necessarily matter, that whatever it is we know the child still needs to be working at, even if it's at school, we can just go with, oh, that's great. Now we're going to work on generalizing those skills to all the settings he's in or she's in.
Because a lot of times kids don't generalize, do they? We've taught them this nice little skill in this nice little room that I've come to visit them once, twice a week, and they can do it for me, but as soon as they walk out that door and somebody else has them, they don't do it. Or they go out, and even if I'm with them, they don't do it because they've learned it here. Yes, ma'am, Michelle.
And those are questions in the communication matrix.
Yes.
How many people they do it for? Where do they do it?
Yes.
For what activity?
Yes.
So that's all goals.
It is all in here, and it's all goals, yes.
What about parents that aren't involved and you don't get any information from them?
What about parents that aren't involved and you don't get any information from them? Well, what do we do anyway? We do it anyway, don't we? There are lots of parents for a variety of reasons. I can't help that. All I can do is do what I'm responsible for. or at least that was always my philosophy, that I can't be, I can't help that parent, and as I've gotten older and wiser, and as a parent and as a grandparent, I don't judge, because I don't know why that parent's not there. And it's interesting to talk to parents and get their take. If you think about it from a parent point of view, and even your own child, when you're asked to come to your child's school and you're sitting on the other end of the table, and all those parents are in there, don't you kind of like, oh my God, and you want to say, but I'm a teacher too. But, we can't be responsible. All we can do is all we can do. And so it may not be the complete picture if I don't have the parent, but I can say what they're doing at school. How's that? I mean, that's all I can do. That's all I got. Remember, I'm a sub. Okay. So the first statement is, my child doesn't seem to have a real control over his body yet. The only way I know that he wants something is because he fusses or whines when he's unhappy or uncomfortable, and he smiles, makes noises, or calms down when he's happy and comfortable. So if that best describes your child, then, okay, that's what you would choose. The next statement is, my child has control over her own behaviors, but she doesn't use them to try to communicate to me. She doesn't come to me to let me know what she wants, but it's easy for me to figure out because she tries to do things for herself. She knows what she wants, and her behavior shows me that what she wants. If she runs out of something to eat, she will just try to get more rather than trying to get me to give it to her. And we know those kids, right? Yes. Yes, that represents a lot of kids that we... All right, then the third statement is, my child clearly tries to communicate his needs to me. He knows how to get me to do something for him. He uses various gestures and sounds like pointing, shaking his head, tugging at my arm, or looking back and forth, that three-point gaze. I look at you, I look at the object, I look back at you, which means, lady, I want a drink. Get it for me. Okay? Then he uses that to get what he wants to communicate with me. For instance, when he wants more milk, he might hand his cup to me or point to the refrigerator. He doesn't use any sort of language or communication. Or my child lets me know what he wants by using some form of language or symbolic communication, such as speech, printed words, braille, picture symbols, three-dimensional symbols, or sign language. When he uses his symbols, it's clear that he understands what they mean. I would go on and use, with these kids, you still, because there could be some of those skills that they're going to need. Okay? All right. Okay, so here is like an example. So does your child intentionally show you that he or she doesn't want a certain thing or a certain activity? If so, what does your child do to refuse or reject something? So a level 3 with body movements, they may use their whole body, head movements, arm or hand movements, leg movements, and you're checking off what he uses, okay? And then, does he use early sounds like screaming or whining? And you're checking those off. Facial expressions, simple gestures. You got some? Michelle?
No,
Okay. I'm waiting. I'm so glad you're here today, Michelle. All right, so those are level 3 that we were looking at. Now this is level 4, the conventional gestures, vocalizations, like gives unwanted items to you or shakes their head, or no specific vocalizations, you know, they would use instead of no, those kind of things. Level 5 with the concrete symbols, they may reject a photo or a drawing, a line drawing of an unwanted item, or they may reject an object symbol, so they may push it away, or they may shake their head no, and reject that symbol that they don't want. Then in level 6, the abstract symbols, they may use the spoken word, no or unfinished. They may manually sign no or stop. The written word, they may write no or finished, braille, no or stop. And then the 3D symbols or 2D abstract symbols. Okay, whoop. When you score the matrix, you first decide if the child can express the message, intentionally show you he doesn't want a certain thing or activity. So it's the intentionality thing. If he does, check off the behaviors he uses, and then decide if the behaviors are emerging, if they're just doing it, or if he's mastered it enough. If it's inconsistent, sometimes he uses it, sometimes he doesn't, then I would say that that's emerging, right? You know, what we're looking for is mastered. So he can do it, he can do it independently, he can also do it in multiple settings across and with multiple people. So that's what we're going for, that's the utopia. Okay. And then the like I've said, with the profile, it has the 4 intents down at the, it's got the intents presented vertically in the 7 columns. You shade or color the box in, that's for the paper pencil version. On the others, they're going to do it for you, which is quite lovely. And then use a different color or diagonal signs to show that it's emerging. So I might use the color orange to say it's mastered. I might use yellow and put lines in it, or just yellow to show that's emerging. And so then I'm able to look at this and I get that clear picture of where this kid is and look at what they're supposed to be, where I need to go next. Yes, ma'am.
If multiple people are doing this, say like in EI or in an IEP, how close together time-wise, I mean, does it need to be in the same week or in the same month or?
She asked if multiple people are doing it, does it need to be in the same week, month? Michelle, what would you?
I was thinking like, say in EI and you've got a
Right, you've got all these different.
age and a parent, and you might only see them weekly.
Yeah, when you have those with EI people, they're not always going to be in the same place, same time.
I'm thinking like, you know, does this child only do it to me because I'm the person they think of signing, but they don't do it with OT or they don't do it with.
Well, and that is something, yeah, because kids will sign to the people that are signing to them, but an OT could come in and they never sign, and a lot of that sometimes is because they know that they don't sign. So why would they sign back to them?
The website says you have 30 days from when you start the assessment to edit the matrix for that child. So that gives you a month.
There you go. And that's true too. There is, when you do your profile on a kid, then there is an edit button. You can go in, you've got your code, there's an edit button, and you can go in and you might say, this is what I found, do you want to look over this to the other folks, that kind of thing. would be my suggestion to kind of where you can gather that information up.